Hi guys, so today we're going to be replacing this Dimplex night storage heater. So this particular one is packed up. They often do after a certain amount of time. They don't last forever like everything else. So when you're changing these, there's quite a few things that you need to be aware of when you're changing them. So we'll just run through those in this video, just to make sure that you don't run into any trouble. So the first thing you need to be careful of is asbestos. So some of these older units do have asbestos in them as insulation. So the first thing you need to do is go through the list, find out what model you've got, and find out whether there's any asbestos contained within that unit. Just because if there is, you're going to have to basically get it removed professionally rather than just taking it apart like we're about to do. Number two, you need to double check that when you're safe isolating the electrics, there are two supplies usually for these heaters. So you'll have two different fuse boards. You'll have an on peak and an off peak. So we'll run through those quickly. So the on peak or peak fuse board or consumer unit, that will be on all the time, 24/7. So no matter what time of day or night it is, whether you're on your sort of economy 7 tariff, economy 10, it's on all the time. So that's just basically what we call peak. So that will come into one of the supplies here, for example. The second type of supply you will have is an off-peak, which will be supplied by the off-peak fuse board or consumer unit, and that will come on whenever your economy 7 or 10 hours are. So that could be sort of at 9 o'clock till 6 o'clock in the morning, or different variations basically. Obviously if you're working on the heater during the day, then it's going to be off, but safely isolate it anyway, just in case anything goes wrong or the equipment's faulty and it comes on. You don't want to be at the other end of an electric shock, so got to make sure that that's safely isolated as well. So the third thing you need to do as well when you're actually replacing this is that the feet or the legs are basically cut out in the carpet. So what you can't do is install the new heater straight onto carpet and underlay, because what will happen, you've got fixings behind the heater, and if you install it straight onto the carpet, what will happen is, although you've marked it and installed and put all the bricks in it, over time that carpet will compress. What happens then is the heater will sink and it will stress the brackets or the fixings on the back of the heater. What can happen then is the thing will start to tip forward, and obviously these things weigh a hell of a lot. They're really heavy bricks, they're very dense bricks, obviously to retain the heat. So yeah, you don't want that falling over. This is quite a small one, but you don't want the bigger ones or any of them really falling over because they are quite heavy. So that's another thing you need to check when you're actually installing them. Number 4, you need to double check the control works for these heaters. So some of them are quite simple. It's just radial circuits from the consumer unit down to the heaters, and you've got an on peak and an off peak. Typically the older style night storage heaters, you'll have literally just into a 20 amp switch or you're into a fuse spur, and that will be supplied straight into the element, and then you'll have the controls actually on here. What we've got in this particular install is we've got the Dimplex control, which will control multiple heaters within this apartment. So you've got to make sure that when you take the old one off and put the new one on, that it's still going to work with the control switches and stuff like that. Otherwise you'll put it on and you'll go to power it up, or the customer will wait until sort of 9 o'clock at night, you'll be at home, and then they'll say it's not heating up or whatever. So you've got to be mindful that the new one that you're installing is compatible with the old one. So that's number 4. So number 5 is you've got to also check the type of heater that you're going to be installing as well. So lots of our clients, they do different things. A lot of them go away from the economy 7, 8, 10, whatever it might be, and they actually opt for just some standard panel heaters. Now what you've got to do if you're going to be replacing night storage with panels, you've got to be careful that you're changing the supplies so that your off-peak supply is coming on all the time during the day. Because if you don't sort that out, then what will happen is you'll put a panel heater on here and the customer will only be able to use it during their economy 7 hours. Obviously during the day they will have no heating whatsoever, which isn't good. So what you've got to do is figure out with the client what they want, whether they want the panel heaters, whether they want light storage heaters replaced, because there's different variations really of what you can do. A lot of it as well will involve the energy company, because if you're going to be keeping the consumer units as they are, so you've got your on peak or peak and your off peak, if you want to keep those as they are and go to panel heaters, what you'll need to do is get the energy company to change the setup for the energy meter, electricity meter, so that both of those fuse boards are supplied during the daytime and the nighttime, or just on 24/7. Usually it will involve taking the meter out and Henley blocking the tails, the meter tails that are in there. So yeah, just make sure that what you're going to be changing to or installing is going to be compatible with the type of electricity setup that you've got. So on our install here, we've got the incoming supply here, goes into the supply cutout here, out of there into the meter, and then we've actually only got, some meters you've got 2 live outputs on here, if it can switch over the economy 7 without having a tele switch, which I'll get into in a minute. But this one only has, you know, your supply in and your load out. This will then come down into this Henny block, so then this will go to the isolator for the peak part of the fuse board, and it'll also come back out of here down and into this tele switch here. So what happens with that one is that will basically receive a radio signal at the time when the economy 7 or 8 or 10 starts. So when that happens, that will then send power back down this live tail here into this second isolator, and that is your second lot of tails there. So then this is our fuse board here. We've actually got one consumer unit here which does both the peak and the off peak. Sometimes in properties you will find that there's 2 separate ones, but in here we've got 2 main switches, because you've got your peak here. This will do all of the daytime circuits, and then this one here you've got your off peak, which is just literally these storage heaters. So be careful when you're working on these night storage heaters, make sure that they're both safely isolated. So lastly, number 6, what you've got to be careful as well, just to bear in mind, is that if you're replacing the heater with a different rating of element, say you're going from a 1500 watt to a 2000 watt or 2 kilowatt heater, you've got to make sure that the circuit can take that kind of current, because what you can sometimes have is these might be, you know, 13 amp switch spurs now, and then you might end up with a 3 kilowatt or, you know, higher potentially, and that will have to change to a 20 amp switch. What you've then got to do is make sure that you've got your overcurrent protection, because if you've got it on a 20 amp switch, you're going to need to make sure that it's got adequate overcurrent protection in the consumer unit, because obviously you've got rid of the fuse that was here. You can also have in some installs kind of ring final circuits which supply heaters, so you'll have a 32 amp circuit that will supply, say, 3 or 4 heaters within the property, and if that happens, you've got to make sure that basically when you replace the heater, you're not A, going over that 32 amps, and B, that you've got sufficient overcurrent protection if you've not got the fuse here. Obviously bear in mind that the regs, I believe it says anything over a 2 kilowatt load should be on its own circuit as well, so bear in mind that, you know, it's all adequately wired basically. So we're going to go ahead and change this unit now, and we're going to be replacing it to another Dimplex, but we're actually going to get rid of the control that is controlling this, because the customer doesn't want that kind of functionality, and also if the heaters are on their way out now, the controller may not be far behind. On this particular install, we are going to get rid of this. We're going to basically wire it in without the control wiring, so it's literally just going to work. I think this one, the one that we're replacing with, you can use it from your phone, so the customer's just going to either use it by the phone, or you've actually got the controls on the top of the heater as well. so this heater now has been replaced. So this is the new one here, the Dimplex Quantum range. So that's all ready for the customer tonight when the economy, I think it's economy 10 comes on. So we've actually changed the controls now, like I said. So this has got no external controller now. So you literally just use it via this. And we've got rid of the external controls that are on the wall, just because if they ever pack up, we're going to have a bit of a problem if we're still kind of working off of this. So that's a kind of standalone heater now for the night storage heater, along with the other one that's in the lounge. So they're both just kind of separate, but you can get an app, I think, for the Quantum range, which you can control all the heaters from your phone. So that's that. So hopefully it's been helpful for everybody. If you're an electrician, you now know how to spot, you know, maybe a tricky job and stop yourself from getting into trouble. And if you're a homeowner, then at least you know as well what to expect from your electrician when they're coming to replace your heaters. So yeah, if this has been helpful, give us a thumbs up and catch you on the next one.